Alex Terrace here, back with a review and educational presentation on pulsed electromagnetic frequency, or PEMF. And we'll be covering today 3 different major waveforms that these machines produce, and that would be sawtooth, square wave, and sinusoidal. 95% of PEMF brands produce sinusoidal and some kind of variation of sine waves, or sinusoidal, and or square waves. And those are really the most common ones. Only a couple brands actually produce sawtooth, and in this video we'll actually dive into why sawtooth is superior, and I will also include what the name of those couple brands, and those are mainly the ones I recommend. So if you're a fan of PEMF or you've heard of it, this is a no BS actual science explanation of, again, the advantages of this specific waveform therapeutically or biologically of sawtooth. Now, a lot of the other vendors of these other types of brands, PEMF, and the so-called experts and educators on PEMF, they don't generally want to talk about what I will in this video regarding sine waves or sinusoidal and square waves, because once you actually really learn how those are working in the body and what they're doing, they are not very valuable and actually can potentially cause more harm or interruptions in the body than good. So I'm not saying, just to kick things off, I'm not saying that square wave and sinusoidal waves don't have some therapeutic value for very specific musculoskeletal things, conditions, symptoms, but it's very, and they do work, and then there is actual research out there. It's just much more limited when you understand the actual metabolic reactions, like what's actually happening on a cellular level inside and outside the cells with those waveforms. You'll then see and understand, okay, I get it. It does have some effect, but again, it's very limited. So we can use that term therapeutic for the musculoskeletal component. And even while you can get some changes in the right direction, so to say, with those couple waveforms, it certainly is not the, in my opinion, the recommended or ideal or optimal way or waveform to use, even when it comes to musculoskeletal healing. Let's jump into it. By the way, if anybody has any questions, just leave those below in the comments below. I also put my email address. I'm a dealer for many different types of products out there, including PEMF. I also educate, I advise on how you stack protocols together, all kinds of stuff, and you can get all that free guidance and everything just by emailing me, asking me questions, and be happy to help. Anyways, moving on. So, section 1. So, what if I told you there's a specific shape of electromagnetic wave that can increase your cellular energy production by up to 600%? And it's not some futuristic technology. This was literally developed over 20 years ago at this point. It's actually really closer, like maybe 30 years ago. Okay? So there's already a lot of scientific research, published studies, really impressive individuals, a couple Nobel laureates and actual winners that were involved with working with specific waveforms in this kind of PEMF research field, especially with sawtooth. So this particular waveform, yes, is capable of increasing ATP production and much more that amount. Normally, when you look at different sorts of modalities and products and supplements that increase ATP, you won't find anything usually that's anywhere close to that. So we're not just going to make that claim today. Oh my God, 600%. You know, what you'll actually come to understand a little bit about, okay, how is that possible? How is that percentage so high? So that is literally what we will be diving into. I'm going to dive into sawtooth waveform and how it literally is the only waveform that can recharge your cells at the molecular level. We'll also break down what that even means. What does it recharge your cells? And that's where we're going to get into things like transmembrane potential and on-transport and a lot of fun things that are a big part of nutrition and biology and all kinds of functions. But they just honestly don't get often educated about or talked about, even though they really are like that level of function in the body metabolically. It should be really a topic of almost any health conversation in terms of how we get better or how we decline. Okay, so let's understand the problem. Right now, as you're watching my video, every single cell in your body is working like a tiny power plant, producing a molecule called ATP. Stands for adenosine triphosphate. Think of ATP as the cellular currency. Without enough of it, your cells become sluggish. Thus, your organs, and I mean every organ, so fully systemic, also don't function properly, and you feel tired and unhealthy. So the shocking truth is that most of us are living with what researchers call a 90% movement deficit. So the issue nowadays is the modern lifestyle, sitting at desks, minimal physical activity, constant stress. That's another major factor. And exposure to artificial electromagnetic frequencies create a perfect storm for cellular depletion. And I might add, there is a tremendous amount of research on each of those topics I just discussed. So it's not like we're wondering, what does that really do? We know full on well, like what stress does. It is mind-blowing when we actually see what that does, all the way down to an epigenetic, from a cellular level to an epigenetic level. They've mapped out a lot of that stuff. And it's really, now we have, again, the perfect storm. All of these things are mixing around, amplifying one another. And this is where it gets really interesting. When your cells don't produce enough ATP, they enter what scientists call a vicious cycle. Low ATP leads to what? Poor cellular membrane function, which leads to even less ATP production, which leads to cellular dysfunction. And eventually, this can contribute to chronic diseases. So it's really a cellular battery problem. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine every cell in your body is like a smartphone. When your phone's battery is fully charged, it runs all its apps smoothly, responds quickly, and performs all of its functions perfectly. But when the battery gets low, everything slows down. Apps crash, and eventually the phone shuts down. That's exactly what happens to your cells. A healthy cell maintains what's called a membrane potential. Basically, it's electric charge between 50 to negative 70 millivolts. Okay, but here's the kicker. About 50% of all the ATP your cells produce is used just to maintain this basic electrical charge, the transmembrane. And that's the difference between the inner membrane and the outer membrane, and from one membrane to another. So if your cells are already struggling to produce ATP, and half of what they do produce, half of what they produce gets used just for basic maintenance, there's very little energy left for healing, growth, repair, and all the other functions that keep you healthy and vibrant. So take a look at all these interesting diagrams. So this is where it gets fascinating. For decades, researchers have been experimenting with different types of electromagnetic fields to try to help cellular function. Basically what they discovered is the shape of the electromagnetic wave makes all the difference. So most devices on the market use what's called a sine wave. Let's look on the screen here. Watch my mouse cursor. See this blue wave right here? Most people know that's a sine wave. All right. Up and down, that's the sine wave. Now that sine wave, this creates a back and forth, and back and forth, oscillating movement in your cellular fluids. It's like people pushing back and forth in a crowded subway station. Lots of energy, lots of movement, but very little actual progress. Now where is our square wave? Yeah, that's okay. I'm supposed to have a square wave here. That's all right, because square wave is easy to imagine. Watch my cursor. A square wave goes up, it's like steps, goes up, flat top, over to the right, straight down, flat again, flat, up, flat top again. It's a square, so you can see it's got squared corners. That's what a square wave looks like, even though you can't see on the screen. So square waves are like sudden traffic surges, basically. They create jolts and counter impulses that can actually work against what you're trying to achieve. And again, we're going to break that down further in a moment. So the Sawtooth wave, which is this one here in red, that's what that looks like. Sawtooth wave is perfectly designed like an escalator system. It has a gradual buildup of energy. That's the rising part, rising, get it? Rising, you see that, gradual? Followed by a sharp, rapid descent. So it's like a roller coaster. There we go, tick, 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 and then it's boom, all the way down, straight down. That rapid descent. And this specific shape creates something that no other waveform can achieve. A net directional movement of ions in your cellular fluid. That's the key. That's like the big prize discovery in 30 plus years of PEMF research. Net directional movement of ions in your cellular fluid, which just so happens to be patented by a company and defended, that process, no less than 70 lawsuits, especially over the last 20 plus years. And again, we're going to get into what that is, why it's so valuable to function on a cellular level. I just want to point out some other thing too is this is a sawtooth wave, but you see that angle that it's rising? You see that angle over a specific period of time? See that? Time, amplitude. So specific amplitude and over a certain rate of change over time. There's many forms of sawtooth waves. So if you saw like multiple sawtooth waves with different amplitudes and time, you'd be like, okay, well, these definitely are sawtooth waves. They look very similar, but they're technically a little bit different. This is where it gets complicated. This is why it took millions of dollars in research and many years and thousands of hours to figure out what's the secret sauce, what's the magic, what's the exact pattern of time rhythms and the exact amplitude. They can actually get ions and these other processes on a cellular level to actually work, can actually affect transmembrane potential. Don't be fooled. This is extremely complex stuff. And when it comes into what's actually going to get the body to do what we need it to do on a cellular level. So very few figured it out. So in this presentation, you'll hear me mention a company, okay, German company, QRS. You may mention also some of the developers. So just keep in mind, there is a specific brand, okay, that has a specific patented sawtooth waveform. So as we're teaching and learning here about the other waveforms, keep in mind that there's a particular sawtooth waveform aligned with certain research group and company that really cracked the code a while ago. You're going to understand why it's the best PEMF out there in terms of medical valuation, published studies, and on a cellular level, what is it actually doing? Why does it actually work with these core cellular processes? The discovery basically of this particular form of sawtooth waveform didn't happen overnight. Dr. Gerard Fischer and an international research team, which I can send you all the scientists' names. You can look them all up. These are best in class, super brilliant geniuses, couple Nobel Prize winners who are very well known. They spent well over 20 years, millions of dollars, experimenting with so many different waveforms. Sine waves, square waves, triangular waves, and there's so many different variations of those. It's really not like an enjoyable thing. You need literally millions of dollars and big research teams, which is exactly what happened. I have another video actually going into this, but it was scientists and researchers across many different countries in Europe who were all involved in this mega research project. It was really awesome to see. Anyways, so when they tried a specific type of sawtooth waveform, or more precisely what they call an exponential function that resembles a sawtooth, okay, they observed a distinct increase in effectiveness. Here's the key quote from the research. Unlike all other pulse forms commonly found on the market, the sawtooth waveform, again a specific kind, made it possible to move specific ions, not all ions, specific ones, we'll get into that, inside the body cells to the desired extent. This pulse form and its amplitude represent what they call the quintessence of over 20 years of magnetic field research. That research is all out there. And again, when you say, is it published? Yes. So literally 95% of other PEMF brands, look and you'll see they do not have any research on their specific device, their specific PEMF brand. 95%. There are some, but the vast majority. And especially, not even just like research, not even forget that, none of it's also published because it's not even there in the first place, no research. So, what does this mean? For the first time in history, scientists could predictably control the movement of ions at the atomic and molecular level inside cells. They had cracked the code on how to influence the most fundamental processes of cellular energy and production. It's not just the energy production, it affects so many of the processes that cells carry out on a daily basis. The ability to excrete waste, metabolic waste, and get rid of them properly. Proper hydration or solute balance. Extracellular versus intracellular fluid. Different cell signaling processes, sending signals from different types of cell types to others. So many other processes. Reproduction. Cell division. So as Dr. Fischer puts it, after more than 3,000 years, during which healers used magnets based on empirical knowledge, we were now able, by means of pulse electromagnetic fields, to exert predictable control on the level of body ions, thus at an atomic and molecular level. Dr. Fischer's super brilliant, but to be honest, one of his biggest contributions is the money. The main reason you honestly do not see a lot of other research with other brands, a lot of other breakthroughs with other things out there in the PEMF space is because it costs a lot of money. This is so complicated, what we're talking about here. It's just so extremely expensive. You may not know this, but Dr. Fisher was very successful in business, okay? Building companies, all kinds of stuff. Very successful. He was a billionaire. He had plenty of money. So when he was assembling all these researchers in various countries and pouring so much time into this, all these people, there was no holdback or red tape or any of that stuff. It wasn't like, oh, we don't have enough funding to explore, this for the next 5 years. Nope. Dr. Fisher could write the check. Oh, you need $2.5 million to do X, Y, and Z? No problem. Imagine what could be accomplished just in general with other healing technologies or this or that, right? If it was just, yeah, I got a blank check and whatever, you need this genius over here. That's really honestly part of the reason also they had all these breakthroughs. They had unlimited funding. So a lot of people don't realize that. There's other people that are capable of doing great stuff. I mean, other companies, things like that. But a lot of times it's just that same stupid financial constraint. What are ions and why do they matter? Let's skip down to the next section. And by the way, I'm going to put the link to this slideshow below in the description box so you guys can dive back into the graphs a little bit more. A lot of it's from the research with this particular brand, and you can look into it and just dive in, learn a little bit more. So what are ions? Why do they matter? So let's make this simple. Ions are electrically charged particles. Think calcium, potassium, sodium, hydrogen. And they need to move in and out of your cells for them to function properly. So here's an analogy. If your cells are factories, ions are like the delivery trucks that bring in raw materials and take away waste products. Without proper ion transport, your cellular factories shut down. Now, your cell membranes have these amazing structures called ion channels. Think of them as highly selective doorways that only allow specific ions to pass through. But here's an example. Imagine that's part of the membrane layer. Imagine that's the external part of the membrane layer of a cell, the cell wall. So you got little channels, okay, where the ions can pass through, like little bridges or highways. So there's selective doorways, these ion channels. They only allow specific ions to pass through based on what the cells need. And that changes constantly, faster than, it's honestly mind-boggling. Science still hasn't even figured out how it happens so fast. But anyways. But here's the problem. When your cells are in an energy depleted state, these doorways don't work efficiently. So the membrane potential connection, when we talk about transmembrane potential, let's get into it. All right. So take a look at the cell membrane here. So this is where it gets interesting. Every healthy cell maintains what's called a membrane potential, basically. It's like a cellular battery charge. In healthy cells, this should be between -50 to -70 millivolts. But when cells become unhealthy, this charge drops. And here's what the scary part is. Research shows that when a cell's membrane potential drops to only -20 millivolts, these cells can actually mutate into cancer cells. So maintaining proper membrane potential isn't about feeling energetic, it's about preventing disease at a cellular level. I wish it was just cancer. Literally, that's just one of many potential consequences. It's truly a monkey wrench in a huge gear mechanism. Imagine that. There are so many consequences that can happen from that. That's why the analogy, imagine everything your cell phone can do, the bajillion functions on it. Well, what if your battery power is too low? It gets too low, it gets too low. It doesn't matter how many functions you have on your cell phone, all the amazing things that you could do with your cell phone, all that software. None of it is going to work that properly if you have too little battery charge. You see what I mean? This is why this is like one of the most consequential things to how the body works in human health. When we start to get into transmembrane potential. And then all the different stressors, toxins, and you name it, that can interrupt transmembrane potential. So some of the leading educators on health, this is what they're talking about. But you also find many people out there who aren't talking about this. They're not talking about the root or the heart, the real causal level of less than optimal health and disease. By the way, some people are wondering, how do you know it's -70 millivolts, right? And all this like charge and stuff. Well, you can just Google that real quick. Just look up like cell voltage or transmembrane potential history, who discovered it and things like that. But the ability of measuring that kind of like battery, if you will, of the cell, that was discovered, I forget how long ago, a very long time ago. So that's an old breakthrough, if you will. So when cells become unhealthy, this charge basically drops. So maintaining proper membrane potential isn't about just feeling energetic. Once again, It's about preventing disease and reinforcing optimal functions, optimal normal cellular metabolic functions. So how do sawtooth waves create this directional flow of ions? And this is showing here in the diagram. There's calcium, there's magnesium ions, okay? There's potassium ions, there's sodium ions, there's also hydrogen ions. I'm listing out, by the way, some of the main, we call electrolytic types of ions that are involved with all these core cellular functions. And when I say cell, I mean every type of cell. This is why it's consequential stuff. So you're like, Alex, what about a neuronal cell, like in the hippocampus of my brain? Yes. What about like the bone cell in my elbow or like the tendon? It's yes. So it's scary and exciting at the same time, right? Oh my God. So potentially like we could have systemic wide interruptions because all these cells are working the same. You get it? On a very base level, a simple level. It's not that simple, but on the level that we're describing right now, metabolically. But if there's interruptions, like something that causes interruptions with these processes of the movement of these ions, these electrolytic minerals and other elements like hydrogen, things like that, then yeah, oh my God, that means it could systemically in all the other cells and all the different structures throughout the body cause the same types of reactions and dysfunction. And the problem is the aging piece too. So if something throws that monkey wrench in early and disturbs some of these processes, over time it just compounds. Started in your elbow and now it's like affecting that same cellular level elsewhere in the body because everything is interconnected in the body. That's the other piece, the important piece. So back to sawtooth waveforms. So how does a sawtooth waveform work? It's magic. Instead of creating random back and forth movements like sine waves or square waves, the sawtooth creates what they call a net directional ion transport. So really you got to imagine an escalator. Let's scroll back to the diagram here. You see the red sawtooth waveform. If you can kind of tilt your head a little bit to the right-hand side, imagine these are like steps on an escalator, if you will. That's really how you're going to get this analogy. So imagine these are like you're on an escalator. These are the steps. And let's say that escalator is moving you upwards. Let's say it's moving you over here to the right side. It's moving you in a specific direction. So the escalator is moving in one direction. The sawtooth waveform is that escalator effect, except for what? The ions in your cellular fluids. So an escalator moves your body. On a smaller level, this mini sawtooth escalator is moving your ions inside your body. So it's like the difference between people bouncing around randomly in a room versus people smoothly riding an escalator in one direction. So again, these other waveforms are randomly bouncing, or they're moving forward. So imagine, look at the sine wave for a second. Imagine it pushing as the wave rides up. It pushes ions up, and then you see how this goes back down again. It's now pulling the ions back the equal amount. Now it's pushing the ion, what? Look at that, the equal amount. It's pushing the waveform again, an equal amount up. Then it's pulling it back the same equal amount a distance. It's neutralizing it. The square wave does the same thing. It's just oscillating and move the ion. Oh, let's move it here. Let's move it back again, the equal amount. You see how it's equal? You see the measurement from this wave top to this one, this sine wave here. You see that level? It's the same distance from here to here. See the distance of that amplitude? That's what we're talking about. That's the challenge and the problem with square waves. So the research showed that this directional movement with the sawtooth escalator, if you will, allows ions to overcome what is called cellular inertia. Basically, it gets lazy ions to moving again, restoring the proper flow of materials into and out of your cells. It would take a longer period of time to explain cellular inertia. Suffice to say, again, ions, for many reasons, they can be influenced or affected to lose their movement when they should be moving. So I guess here's a funny analogy. I don't know. There could be a lot of things on your plate one day, and it just causes you to be seated at your seat, like you're at a seat at a desk for a longer period of time than you expected, right? So you're sitting in your chair for 7 hours when really you should have been being seated for 2 hours, but this happened and this happened and this happened, and now you're sitting for a much longer period of time, and now you have consequences from seating so long. And so imagine that that's like a chain reaction. Now, because you sat for much longer, there's some metabolic consequences because of that. And those consequences, they lead to more consequences. And it's just like an ongoing chain reaction. So how do you break the vicious cycle? Remember what the vicious cycle is. Low ATP leads to poor membrane function, which leads to even less ATP production. The Sawtooth waveform breaks the cycle by doing something remarkable. Instead of your cells having to use precious ATP to restore membrane potential, the electromagnetic field does this work for them. This means more of the cell's ATP become available for healing, repair, growth, and all the other sorts of functions that keep you healthy. So it's like having someone else pay your electricity bill. Suddenly, what? You have more money available for other things you need to buy. Maybe you've been eating beans for a week. Now you buy like some steak, eggs, I don't know, whatever you like eating. You're buying a lot more calories. Hence, you start to feel a lot better. You have way more energy. Now you're going out for job interviews, or now you can work twice as long. So this is what's so exciting. If ATP is getting sucked up by maintaining transmembrane potential at like 50%, that's a massive amount of ATP being used for that. But wait a minute, you can just charge up that transmembrane. It's like plugging in your phone with the right waveform. Because remember, a PEMF is giving your body energy, right? You're plugging it into a wall. It's getting energy from the electricity from the wall. It's putting it into a biocompatible electromagnetic form. Does that make sense? Let's back up a second. When you eat pizza or you eat food, do you think that your cells eat pizza? Do you think that your cells eat ice cream or eat steak or eat veggies? Are your cells eating that? No, they're not eating that. That food gets broken down so much to a degree that eventually there's ions freed from those, amongst other things. And that is part of the energy storage mechanism. Does that make sense with ATP? Okay. So if we're getting into subatomics, electromagnetics, right? Couldn't you just give your body electromagnetic food, if you will? Yes, you can. I know it sounds easy when you explain it, but this is extremely complicated stuff. This is literally why most waveforms don't work. This mechanism I'm describing, it's just not that easy to have this actually charge up your transmembrane cellular battery. Oh, but lo and behold, 95% of PEMF, almost all of them, are all talking about the same concept, saying, oh yeah, our PEMF does that. Oh yeah, sure, our waveform does that. Yeah, we do that, yeah. We're not gonna ever prove it to you. We can't prove it. We have nothing to reference whatsoever, but we'll make that claim. We'll say that our PEMF's doing it, sure. So you might see people talking about transmembrane or cell voltage. You might see some companies throwing around those terms. They can't back it up with anything, just FYI. So they'll say, oh yeah, ours does that, yeah. There's even things out there that are not sinusoidal and are not square waves or triangular. They're called spark gap, PEMF, and they'll make the same claims that they can do all this. It's not that easy. And honestly, I've only found this one research group and now within this one company that actually pulled this off. Let's move on to section 4. What does phase locked mean? So we're going to talk about something really cool, what scientists call the phase locked effect. Don't worry, I'm going to make it super simple because this can be very complex in the field of physics. It can take you hours to actually really get it. So in a sawtooth pulse, the magnetic field and the electromotive force work in phase, meaning they're perfectly synchronized, like two people rowing a boat in perfect rhythm instead of fighting against one another. All right. So, and I'm going to show you that is this diagram here on the right. All right. So imagine two people trying to row a boat. If they're rowing out of sync, one is pulling while the other pushes, the boat goes nowhere and they waste a lot of energy. But if they row together in perfect synchronization, the boat moves smoothly and efficiently in one direction with minimal energy waste. So do you see that? This is an illustration of a waveform that's the magnetic force or the magnetic portion of the field. See that magnetic field? And this is the electrical field. They're actually, you're looking at a 2D graph, so it's a little confusing because this is actually something that is easier to see in 3D and really understand. But you see how they're lined up in the same rhythm. Does that make sense? So a magnetic field and an electrical field, okay, they're lined up. They're rowing in the same direction. The magnetic and the electrical field are in synchronization. And I know it's still confusing, right? For those who just don't get this stuff. But hopefully these kind of get the analogy, okay? So the sawtooth pulse works in 4 distinct phases. Each phase has a specific job. So there's the rising buildup. Both the magnetic field and electrical force increase together. So we're increasing, see this in this phase right here? We're increasing together at the same time. You see how they look the same? So again, electrical and magnetic field forces are increasing together gradually. It's like winding up a spring. You're building up potential energy. If you could actually see this from the side angle in 3D, you'd realize that actually these two forces are actually winding together. But when you look at it on the flat 2-dimensional like this, like taking a snapshot, it looks flat, like a 2D representation. That's why it's confusing. But honestly, it's like you're winding energy. That's really a better way to describe it. So both forces reach their maximum strength at the exact same time. You see this right here, the maximum strength, the peak, at the same time variable down here. That's what this line represents, time. It's at the, let's just call it 3 seconds for now. At the 3-second mark, peak, all right? So they reach their same peak, same time. This is when you get the maximum electromagnetic efficiency. Then you have the rapid descent. Both forces reach their maximum strength, same time. The descent part, that's where the magic happens essentially on this phase right here. That sharp drop creates what researchers call a powerful induction flank that acts like a vacuum. This pulls specific ions out of solution, okay? Now, some people who really understand biology and health and nutrition on this level, they should start to become extremely excited about what I just said. Because a lot of people, even though it's been around for a couple decades, there would be so many people who are really into health and biology and actually understand what I'm saying, and they're gonna be like, wait a minute, what? Wait, there's already something out there. There's a health device that actually can do this, that can do what you just said. I can't believe this, and it's been around so long. Yeah, yes, this health breakthrough, this cellular metabolic breakthrough, it's been around a while. Yes, no, they don't do good marketing. Sorry, I apologize on behalf of them. Millions and millions and millions of practitioners and people should know about this. So it's a pulling on this level, right? This part of the phase of the waveforms. It pulls the ions out of their solution. Now this could be outside the cell in solution. It could be inside the cell in solution, just to be clear. So the directional result, instead of ions just vibrating back and forth, remember like with the sine waves or the square waves, going back and forth the equal amount, moving it back and forth, instead of that kind of vibration, you get a net movement in one direction. It's the escalator. It pulls it. You see, so it pulls the ions down here, pulls them in, and then what? Now that it's pulled it this direction, it's going to move it again in the same direction and then pull it some more. Down, down. You see it's down further here? Now it's going to move it again. Now it's going to pull it down again, and it's going to move it again over a specific 4-second, imagine these are seconds, in the next few seconds, down further, in the next few seconds, down further, or in the milliseconds, or 1,000th of a second. Moving. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like a moving escalator moving in one direction, but pulls with each step or stair, it pulls the ion out of solution further in a net movement, and it's moving the ions abundantly to where they're needed. So let's talk about hydrogen ion extraction. So one of the most fascinating discoveries during the rapid descent phase, okay, of the sawtooth pulse, it preferentially extracts hydrogen ions from your blood and cellular fluids. Why hydrogen ions? Because they're the lightest and most mobile ions in your system. The research describes this as hydrogen hopping or H hopping. Hydrogen ions literally hop through your cells and accumulate at cell membranes where they can do the most good. As the researchers described it, it is the faster particles, especially the hydrogen ions, that are moved. They quite literally hop through the cell and are only slowed down at the cell membrane. Again, there's going to be a lot of people that are extremely excited about this. When you start to get into core cellular functions, there's so much research and material on just the knowledge about what are hydrogen ions doing in the membranes of cells. So this goes way beyond all these PEMF researchers. There's just a ton of information on biology about what I'm talking about right here. By the way, a lot of people don't even realize the ratios of hydrogen ions positive and negative. This is correlated to also the balance between acid and alkaline in every cell and every part of fluids in every part of the body, in all tissues. Okay, so that might connect a few more dots for people. So the perpendicular power effect. So here's another crucial detail that makes this system so effective. Where's my perpendicular force? Perpendicular force analysis. This gets a little technical, and I'm going to try to make it simple though. So crucial detail here. So the magnetic field and the electromotive force act perpendicular to one another at right angles. There's the ion, and so what that means is that's the ion, and it's producing an electrical field that direction, all right, and it's producing a magnetic field the other direction. They're perpendicular to one another. I know some people are like, wait a minute, I remember that term from geometry class or whatever it is, right, or science class. So this creates what physicists call a compound force effect. It's like having two people push a heavy box. If they both push from the same direction, they're adding their strength together. But if they push from perpendicular angles, they can move the box in ways that would be impossible with just one person. This perpendicular relationship allows the sawtooth pulse to move ions in your bloodstream in one direction during the rise phase, and then extract different ions during the rapid descent phase. That can only happen if you can create this perpendicular force in the body, in the fields, in the fluids that affect ions in different ways. If it's not the specific type of waveform, it literally doesn't produce that exact perpendicular electromotive magnetic force. Does that make sense? So this has to be very, very, very precise stuff on the waveforms to actually produce these types of forces that again act on ions, moving them in different ways and affecting different types of ions. If it's just a little bit off, this literally doesn't work. Once again, this is why it was such a pain in the ass to figure this stuff out, and it cost so much money and took so many brilliant people. They literally had to even invent new ways of measuring this stuff. It's not like you're going to like look at a cell in a microscope. Let's look at the cell. Oh, this electromagnetic force, I saw it move the ion. That's unfortunate. That's not how the microscopes worked. It's way more complicated than that. They had to find new ways of detecting these things in order to calculate and figure out how to alter these waveforms. So move on to section 5 here. Section 5, ATP boost explained. Let's connect all the ion transport to actual ATP production. Inside every cell, you have these amazing structures called mitochondria, your cellular power plants. So this is basically where the magic of ATP production happens. So here's a little mitochondrion. That's what it's supposed to represent. Think of mitochondria basically like tiny factories with assembly lines. They take in glucose and fatty acids and amino acids, combine them with oxygen, and through a complex process called oxidative phosphorylation, they manufacture ATP, your cellular energy currency. Okay, so it's a chemical series of bonds that are storing energy. So here's the takeaway. This process is entirely dependent on proper ion gradients. Without the right flow of ions, especially hydrogen ions, across mitochondrial membranes, ATP production basically will grind to a halt. So this is basically where the research gets really exciting. You can take a look at like electron flow across the mitochondrion, enhanced O2 diffusion. So there's a lot of cool little diagrams here. Again, you'll have access to this below in the description if you want to take a look at it. And when you see, by the way, all these percentages changes, cellular ATP, oxygen utilization, all these different changes and graphs, this is all pulled, by the way, just from all the research that went into that one particular brand of PEMF I keep referring to. So the research gets exciting. When researchers tested the sawtooth electromagnetic fields, they found something remarkable. Oxygen utilization increased by up to 300%, okay, in sealed glass chambers. When they basically applied pulsating magnetic fields to sealed glass chambers, again, oxygen diffusion increased by up to 300%. Even in hermetically sealed conditions, completely airtight, oxygen diffusion still increased by 90%. So some of you may have had the creative idea of, wait a minute, what if we're doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy and Do you think that would be synergistic? Absolutely. How synergistic? I've advised many clinics on doing that combo. Here's the good news is the electromagnetic fields can easily travel through the super thin, essentially, membranes of a hyperbaric chamber. As far as there are some hard shells, it depends on the particular place you put it. On the hard shell, you might still be able to get the signal through. But if it is a soft shell mild, absolutely, you can get the PEMF waveforms through. And that greatly enhances utilization of the oxygen that's in a hyperbaric chamber, significantly so. You may need a fraction of the amount of hyperbaric sessions so you can get results a lot faster. If anybody was wondering that. So anyways, so why does that matter when they're doing that research regarding the oxygen diffusion increasing even in hermetically sealed conditions? Because oxygen is the final electron acceptor in ATP production. More available oxygen means more efficient mitochondrial function, which means dramatically more ATP production. It's like upgrading your cellular power plants essentially from coal burning to nuclear reactors. It's pretty good analogy. So remember how I told you that 50% of cellular ATP gets wasted just maintaining membrane potential? Well, here's how the Sawtooth waveform changes that equation. When the electromagnetic field restores and maintains proper membrane potential, it creates what researchers call hyperpolarization. See if I have a diagram here. No. During hyperpolarization, energy is actually conserved or even replaced instead of being consumed. It's like having a solar charger for your phone instead of your phone's battery draining to power basic functions. The external charger handles that job, leaving your battery free for all the apps and features you actually want to use. What's the result? The overall energy balance of the cell improves dramatically. More ATP is produced, less ATP is wasted on basic maintenance. So there's more, but wait. The Sawtooth pulse triggers what scientists call a calcium cascade, a chain reaction of beneficial cellular processes. So here's how this works. Those hydrogen ions that get driven to cell membranes, they create an acidic environment that displaces calcium ions from membrane binding sites. These freed calcium ions then migrate into cells where they act like cellular messengers, activating key enzymes and metabolic pathways. This cascade effect includes enhanced enzyme activity, which is basically your cellular machinery working more efficiently, accelerates cellular repair, so what gets damaged gets fixed faster, optimized energy cycles, supply and demand becoming better balanced, overall improved ATP production, more energy for everything your cells need to do. So the complete ATP enhancement process, I'm going to bring together now. When you apply a Sawtooth electromagnetic fields to your body, this is the process that unfolds. Step one, ion mobilization. Hydrogen and calcium ions start moving directionally. Membrane restoration in step two. Cell membrane potential is restored and enhanced. Step three, oxygen boost. Cellular oxygen utilization increases up to 300%. Step four, metabolic activation. Enzymes and cellular machinery become more active. Step five, ATP surge. Mitochondria produce significantly more ATP. Step six, energy availability. More ATP becomes available for cellular functions. Step seven, cellular health. Overall cellular functions improve, leading to better health. So the end result is your cells go from struggling to survive to thriving with abundant energy. Almost near the end. Section 6, real results in science. So the numbers don't lie. Let me show you the actual research data. In controlled studies using the Sawtooth electromagnetic fields, researchers measured actual ATP levels in people before and after treatment. The results, most people showed ATP increases between 100% and 600% after just 20 minutes of exposure. That means like literally running the electromagnetic fields for 20 minutes, okay, on the full body. So I'll break that down. There was a British test group. Their average was 241% ATP increase. There was a Chinese test group, 111% average increase. Individual peak results showed basically up to 600% ATP increase, meaning some people got that, some people didn't. Treatment duration, again, was just 20 minutes. Now, with this system, I won't get into it, but some of those numbers are achievable with less time. Long story short, 8 to 16 minutes. And the reason for that is just because there are some variables and settings in terms of the intensity of the fields that you can apply to produce some results more efficiently. So again, these aren't theoretical numbers I just rattled off here. These are actual measurements using professional ATP monitoring equipment. A lot of people are familiar with the ATP, energy production, all that stuff, its consequences, but there's really very few modalities out there, even just lifestyle practices, that are capable of moving the numbers like this. So I'll share one of my favorite discoveries from this huge body of research that got involved with this particular PEMF project. So basically, the scientists found that when ions move under electromagnetic stimulation, it's as if we ourselves are moving our bodies. During physical activity, the same ion transport processes occur naturally. Get it? So let's talk about modern lifestyle problems. So remember, 90% of people have a movement deficit, okay? So most of us would need to walk 15 kilometers daily or engage in 1.5 hours of intense physical activity to naturally achieve what the Sawtooth electromagnetic field can accomplish in 20 minutes. Because again, remember, it's an electromagnetic field affecting every single cell, every type of cell type in your entire body, all at the same time in an organized fashion. That's again why it's, oh my God, I'd have to do a lot of movement, a lot of exercise to eventually directly, indirectly, metabolically have that same effect. It's just way more efficient to do it electromagnetically. So as the Nobel laureate Dr. Linus Pauling, who's top 20, one of the most accomplished scientists of all time, father of molecular biochemistry and so much more, super brilliant. He was involved in this research project that went into this particular PEMF brand, the Sawtooth wave. So he's quoted as saying, humanity needs this device from children to elderly so that the electrobiological processes in the human body can be reactivated. And he said a lot of other really impressive and significant quotes. Same with Dr. Robert Becker. Dr. Robert Becker was also, this is the only PEMF research project he was ever involved in. I just want to keep citing. A lot of other PEMF companies like to cite Dr. Robert Becker and give some of his quotes and reference him, but he was only ever involved with this particular team of PEMF researchers where he directly contributed on record to this particular development of this certain type of sawtooth wave. Just want to be perfectly clear. So he's very well known. Some people refer to him as a little bit more of the father of or major leading figure with electromedicine, essentially. Very well known in the electromedicine sort of field and of study. Using the PEMF is like having a personal trainer for your cells. So they get the benefits of exercise without having to train to become a marathon runner. Just even those last statements, when you really get into what processes get activated during exercise on a cellular level, core metabolic functions, wait a second, we can reproduce that without the exercise. That's another statement where there's gonna be a lot of people in the fitness world, exercise world, PTs, you name it, different types of practitioners who are gonna be like, oh my God, wait, this has been around for how long? This is actually possible? This really does that? Yes. So, oh, well, yeah, can't you just do this over here, do that? No, actually, the only way after 15 years of research that I know to do some of these things is exercise. So it's a breakthrough. I wish there was a lot of other methods and technologies and things that could replicate this sort of effect, but no, I mean, I've pretty much only found this. So you can think about all the possibilities of what that means, right? For people that are definitely lifestyle-wise not leading the super active lifestyle like they should. Unfortunately, it's the vast majority. When they say it's 90% modern lifestyle issue, it really is. And then think about all the people that can't really quite do the type of physical exercise they really need to for various reasons. They're encumbered by whatever the reasons are, right? They also could have the benefits. What about people that have serious health declines when they get sick and they have to lay in bed or on the couch for a significant period of time? That there's studies on that, by the way, and it's drastic. Basically, what happens, the amount of aging on a cellular level from not being active. Think about all those people in all those scenarios in a hospital bed or at home or whatever, or disabled. It frustrates me a lot because this is a breakthrough, very unique modality that really, when you've been around enough for years, you hear the miracles that happen. And like still to this day, even though there's tens of thousands of these around the world, it's still a tiny fraction of what there should be, and almost nobody knows about what I'm talking about here. And really millions and millions and billions of people should know, should at least be aware that it exists. It's very frustrating. Anyways, there's just a huge amount of verified research around this. Over 20 years of development have led to the pinnacle of this particular PEMF. Multiple university studies and hospitals and all kinds of different institutions are involved. Different couple Nobel laureates, as I mentioned. Reproducible results across thousands of different test subjects. International patent protection for the ion transport mechanisms. Peer-reviewed publications in scientific journals. And I said before, remember, 95% of PEMF don't have any of what I just listed. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So when you spend thousands or tens of thousands on most PEMF, it's just, I hope it works for you. Like, it didn't kill anybody yet, but it doesn't mean it won't kill you. That's basically, unfortunately, I'm not joking. That's the PEMF industry in a nutshell. I hope it works for you. Okay, can you prove it can help me? No. Can you prove it will harm me? No. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. But Alex, so-and-so endorsed it, and he's a genius at blah, 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 blah. Exactly. That's the problem. That's part of the problem, is we have a lot of people that have jumped on the bandwagon, incentivized, and are spreading not just bad science, but a lot of unsubstantiated claims, and just basically just they're part of the marketing machine, I guess is really what it is. They're just part of marketing efforts and not really asking the harder questions and doing their due diligence on these various PEMF companies and stuff like that. But anyways, so I'm excited about the research, sure. What's more exciting, though, is honestly when you restore proper cellular ATP production. So it's really the root of chronic disease when you get right down to, it's not the only root, but it is a very significant one that affects the other roots, I guess you could say. There aren't really 326 different diseases. There's honestly one of the main fundamental problems is that cells become dysfunctional due to an energy deficient. And the research indicates essentially that regular use of properly designed Sawtooth electromagnetic therapy will support cellular repair and regeneration, enhanced immune system function, improved cardiovascular health through better circulation, improved sleep and recovery. And I've seen incredible things with people's sleep trackers, by the way. I can't even begin to tell you all the things I've seen, but enhanced overall vitality, well-being, better cellular function essentially as you're aging, thus an anti-aging, slowing down some of the dysfunction. There's also the term reverse aging, by the way, and when you really get down to it, it's not like completely reverse aging every function of a cell, I wish, but it is reverse aging some of the core main functions, some of the greatest impact metabolic functions of cells. Now, that's not to say that 30 years later, that same cell, well, first off, will be dead. You have new cells in their place, but there is still the aspect of, are you going to make the same perfect copies as before, perfect cells? And I will just say, sure, no, you're not. Unfortunately, you'll still be 80 years old, and there's still a difference between being 17 and being 80. However, when you go through the cellular replication processes and get your brand new cells, right? It's an absolute fact that if that cell is that much healthier and has a lot of energy and your ion transport and cell signals are working better, that replication of that next cell, when you get that brand new cell in its place, it's basically going to be as good, if not better than it was before, for some period of time. Obviously, age still does affect us, but you get the idea. These same core mechanisms have a great influence on the ability of a cell to replace itself with an as good or better, healthier, more optimized cell in its place. So if that makes sense. So there's aging is aging. So we can slow the aging process down on a cellular level with this, and we can reverse age as core metabolic aspects of cells for a certain period of time. In other words, some things will reverse age to a point. But still, even saying that is like miraculous. There's not a lot of things that we could really talk about that You can really show and prove, hey, this is like really happening, right? It's not theorized. So anyways, that's it for this long presentation. Obviously, we could dive into more aspects of all of this. And if anybody has any other ideas of where you'd want me to pivot from here, if you want me to do a part 2, but most importantly, if you want to be turned on to this particular PEMF that I think is the best, I am a dealer, a distributor for this company called Quantron Resonance Systems, started by Dr. Fisher, which is where all this awesome research ended up going into with the patent and this particular type of sawtooth waveform that's the most validated. So yeah, if you want a good price on that machine, and they're so confident in everything. So Alex, you talked about all the stuff it's doing. Do they put their money where their mouth is? Hey, guess what? They sure do. Ever since they first came out, 6 months return window. Do you know of any technology, modality, or product that has 6 months of return window? A satisfaction guarantee? Yeah, there's a tiny restock fee. Sure. But still, have you ever heard of such a thing? I haven't. And I deal with close to 100 different health equipment and device companies. I've never come across that. Well, that's interesting, right? You're selling something that's a few $1,000 and they have a 6-month return window. Just from that alone, you should start to assume that, man, to have such a low return rate and to actually financially make that viable and work, this should have a positive outcome on whatever the health condition or the health goals are that all these different consumers or customers have. So whatever the reasons they buy this thing, this particular PEMF, it seems to be working 98 to 99% of the time such that they don't want to return it. And I say 98, 99 because basically now for 10 years I've followed up with the main distributors, and it's about 1 to 2% return rate on an annual basis is what the company experiences. So I can just tell you that I only know of a couple other modalities that are that high, 98, 99, okay? And because again, for a broad amount of health goals, health conditions, oh, I have a headache, oh, I have migraines, oh, I have cancer, oh, I have a sleeping problem, I have a knee meniscus tear, I could go on and on and on and on and on and on, okay? 98 to 99% satisfaction rate. So when you see that with the return rates and then the return window satisfaction, it's like, whoa, okay, maybe this is real, right? Even if you're just like, you're looking at the studies and you're just still so skeptical, this company would not be able to stay in business, let me tell you, if that return rate was even a little bit higher, okay? If you're selling something for that type of price. Price point is $3,500 if you're getting a good price on the new model. There's a couple dealers out there that are selling old used inventory that are no longer covered by warranty, by the way, so watch out. So I buy directly from the importer, the person who brings all the units into the United States and has for the last 20 years. So if you want a good price and you also want access to that individual who has trained and supported thousands and thousands of people over that period of time, then you just go through me and you get that level of training and support. It is extremely easy to use this thing and get results, by the way, so don't worry. But there is some strategy, okay, in how you use it to get the best outcomes. I will also tell you this, besides putting your money where the mouth is, I can just tell you from personal experience, if you are doing lab panels, tests, and all that good stuff, and looking at biomarkers, use this consistently for 2 to 3 months, retest, and almost any biomarker on any lab panel type of test that was not optimal, you will see some changes in. I know, it's quite a statement. You will see some changes with almost anything you test for, as long as it's out of balance or out of range or not optimized. Because again, this is affecting every cell, every part of your body. It upregulates everything. So given enough time, 99% of the time, 98% of the time, you will see changes. If you don't see something move and change in a beneficial way after that period of time, you need to do more testing, basically. In other words, you need to take that thing much more seriously and realize, okay, there's some other significant contributing factors here on why this particular score, whatever it is not budging or moving enough. You need to take whatever that is, again, seriously, because this generally will improve just about anything. And if you got trackers and biometric trackers and stuff like that, again, you can see results from this PEMF with all those things that are quite surprising. And if you have those types of trackers and stuff, usually within 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks, you'll see those changes. So anyways, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please support me. Please refer me to others for guidance and advice. Reach out to me. That allows me to do what I do and to spread this information transparently while everybody else spreads a bunch of bad information a lot of times, depending on the product category. So hopefully you found this educational and helpful.